Warning! You're about to experience Metamodernism Uncensored, a podcast for diagnosing the cultural rot of the postmodern world and searching for real truth. It's time to question everything, especially yourself.
Welcome to Metamodernism Uncensored, the podcast diagnosing our postmodern world and attempting to push through to achieve metamodern synthesis.
So glad to be here for this one because, man, we have a lot to unpack today.
We really do. I mean, okay, I want you to imagine just for a second that you are throwing this massive blowout 250th birthday party for your revered grandfather.
Oh, wow. Okay. Setting the stage early.
Right. You've completely pulled out all the stops. I'm talking fireworks over the lawn. There are marching bands in the street, an endless flow of top-shelf champagne, and just these glowing, beautiful speeches about his legacy.
Sounds like a great party.
It does, right. But, and here's the catch, in the background, entirely out of sight of the guests, the family has actually secretly sold his house.
Yikes.
Yeah. They've forged his signature on this absolute mountain of high-interest debt. They fired all the staff he hired, and they actually placed armed guards at the doors to ensure he can't even enter the main dining room to interrupt the posts.
That's dark, but it's also incredibly accurate for what we're talking about today.
Exactly, because we are looking down the barrel of America's semi-quincentennial, the big 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence coming up in 2026.
The big 250.
Right. And today we're kind of bypassing the bunting on the National Mall and the fighter jet flyovers. We're doing a deep dive to examine the profoundly uncomfortable reality behind all of that pageantry.
Which is necessary work, honestly.
It is. We're looking at this blistering, just highly provocative essay published in The Opposition. It's by a libertarian writer, Sean Dempsey, and it's titled America 250, Can a Broken Country Celebrate Itself?
And I have to say, that analogy of the grandfather's birthday you just used,
Yeah.
It captures the essence of Dempsey's critique so perfectly.
Right. It really paints the picture.
It does. I mean, his essay functions as this structural, almost surgical diagnosis of modern American political hypocrisy. We're basically treating this piece today as a diagnostic tool, to understand a very specific, deeply ingrained political condition.
And just a quick disclaimer for you listening at home, we are going to explore some highly charged political critiques today, both left-wing and right-wing.
Oh, absolutely. Everyone gets hit in this essay.
Yeah, nobody is safe. And our goal here isn't to, endorse Dempsey's views or take a political side.
Right.
We're just trying to impartially report on the arguments he lays out and understand what they reveal about the system.
Right. And the task for you, the listener today, is to try to hold two competing, incredibly tense ideas in your mind simultaneously.
Which is not easy to do.
It's really not. On one hand, you have the profound philosophical beauty and, the genuine historical miracle of America's founding ideals.
Right.
But then on the other hand, you have the undeniably ugly, frequently cynical reality of its political machinery.
Yeah.
Holding those two realities together without retreating into just pure anger or pure denial.
Yeah.
That is the painful but totally necessary work of the metamodern synthesis.
Yeah, that tension is everything. And to really ground us in that tension, I think we have to look at how Dempsey opens the piece. Because he doesn't exactly ease the reader into this.
No, he drops an anvil right on page 1.
He really does. He drops this heavy anchor right off the bat regarding the disconnect between the reverence we show our founding documents, and how our political class actually behaves.
Yeah, you have the quote there, right?
I do. Let me just read it verbatim because it's so punchy. He says, quote, "It is a matter of great comfort to the people of the United States that, upon reaching the venerable age of 250 years, the Republic has at last achieved the maturity of a venerable old man who loudly praises his cherished Bible, meanwhile cheating at cards, abusing his wife, beating his children, drinking away the inheritance, and occasionally setting fire to the neighbor's house in the name of neighborhood security."
Man, that is a brutal opening.
It really pulls no punches.
It doesn't. And the metaphor of that cherished Bible is really central to understanding the modern political operating system.
Because the Bible in this analogy is the Constitution, right?
Exactly. Dempsey is illustrating that. In Washington, the Constitution is treated with this immense theatrical respect in public. It's praised in campaign ads. Politicians literally swear their oaths upon it with their hands on fiscal Bibles.
Right. They quote it endlessly on cable news panels.
Endlessly.
Yeah.
But in the actual practice of legislating and governing, Dempsey argues it's treated like a decorative napkin at a banquet of thieves.
A decorative napkin. Wow.
Yeah. The political class admires it deeply, provided it doesn't actually, interfere with the business of governing or spending money or consolidating their own power.
Okay, I hear that and I get the critique, but I kind of have to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go for it.
Isn't some level of hypocrisy just like the baseline operating temperature of literally any human institution?
I mean, sure, humans are fallible.
Right. Look at the corporate world. It's like going to a mandatory corporate retreat where the executive board gives this 3-hour keynote presentation on their absolute devotion to core values. Work-life balance, mental health.
Oh, yeah. We've all been through those presentations.
Exactly. But meanwhile, they made their entire lower-level staff work through the weekend, missing their kids' soccer games just to set up the slide deck for the retreat.
Right. The irony is thick.
It's wildly hypocritical, but it's also, I don't know, entirely expected. So is what Dempsey is describing in Washington really that different from just standard run-of-the-mill hypocrisy?
That's a completely fair question, but Dempsey argues it's a matter of scale and design.
Okay, how so?
Well, if politicians were merely corrupt in the traditional sense, like skimming money off the top of infrastructure contracts or engaging in shady backroom real estate deals.
These are bribes, that kind of thing.
Right. If it was just that, we could write them off as ordinary, flawed specimens of humanity. We could arrest them, vote them out, clean up the mess.
Yeah, that's just normal crime.
Exactly. But Dempsey's core argument is that the cruelty of the modern American system is that these figures are corrupt in the language of virtue itself.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. They wear the sacred historical robes of the Republic while simultaneously selling tickets to the circus. Hypocrisy is no longer like a bug in the system. It is the actual operating system of modern Washington.
So they aren't breaking the rules in secret. They are breaking the rules in plain sight and calling it patriotism.
Nailed it. That's exactly it.
Which, that perfectly sets up one of Dempsey's most biting kind of satirical proposals for the America 250 celebrations. He has these modest proposals woven throughout the essay.
They are so good. Very Jonathan Swift.
Very. So since hypocrisy is the operating system, he suggests that we should update the oath of office to reflect reality.
Oh, right. I remember this one.
Yeah, so you take the traditional oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution, but then you have to add this honest caveat out loud at the end.
What's the caveat?
Except when inconvenient, unpopular, expensive, strategically disadvantageous, or opposed by major donors.
Which just completely gets the oath.
It totally hollows it out. It's like a couple at their 50th wedding anniversary renewing their vows and saying, I promise to love and cherish you, subject to market conditions and my current mood.
Yeah, that doesn't really inspire confidence, does it?
Not at all.
But by mandating that caveat, Dempsey is highlighting the absurdity of the current arrangement. The oath is currently an absolute statement, but it's treated as a conditional suggestion.
Right. It's totally conditional.
And if hypocrisy is the operating system, it requires a massive, constant fuel source to keep running. I mean, you cannot fund a banquet of thieves on good intentions alone.
No, you definitely can't.
You have to borrow. And this naturally leads to Dempsey's devastating critique of the national ledger and just the sheer theater of our national debt.
Ah, yes. The theater of debt. We are currently looking at a national debt of roughly $39 trillion.
Which is just a staggering number.
It is. Dempsey says this debt hangs over the republic like an albatross around the neck of the bald eagle. He says the eagle still looks majestic in all those campaign montages, but it is flying dangerously low to the ground.
Flying very low, yeah.
And 39 trillion is a number so large that the human brain can't actually comprehend it. It's totally abstract.
Right. It stops meaning anything to the average person.
Exactly. But the mechanisms they use to manage it, or I guess pretend to manage it, are incredibly concrete and honestly incredibly cynical.
To understand that cynicism, we really have to look at the mechanics of the debt ceiling, which Dempsey exposes as just pure political theater.
Okay, break that down for us, because I think people get confused by the debt ceiling.
Yeah, it's confusing by design. So historically, the concept of a debt limit was actually created to make things easier for the government.
Wait, really? It was meant to be helpful?
Yeah. During World War I, with the Second Liberty Bond Act of 1917, Congress allowed the Treasury to issue bonds up to a certain limit without needing congressional approval for every single bond issuance.
Oh, okay. So it was an efficiency tool, so they didn't have to vote every 5 minutes.
Exactly. It was meant to streamline things.
Yeah.
But today, it has morphed into this bizarre, performative hostage situation.
How so?
Well, Congress passes these massive spending bills, right? They authorize the government to spend the money. Then later, when the Treasury hits the borrowing limit required to actually pay for this spending Congress already authorized, Congress acts like this borrowing is a sudden offensive surprise.
Which is insane. Dempsey has a great analogy for this. He compares the act of a politician proudly voting to raise the debt ceiling to a drunkard trying to solve his alcoholism by just purchasing a taller bottle.
That's a great image.
Right. Or, even better, he says it's like a man ordering this massive decadent banquet for 400 people, eating half of the food himself, and then standing up at the end of the night to make a brave, impassioned speech to the room about the absolute immorality of paying the waiter.
That's exactly what happens. The mechanics of that analogy are just incredibly precise.
They really are.
Because they get the political reward of handing out money to their constituents and their donors. That's authorizing the banquet.
Right. They love doing that part.
Of course. But then they attempt to harvest the political reward of looking tough on fiscal responsibility by threatening to default on the debt.
Ah.
They perform the role of the fiscally responsible objector after the money is already out the door. It's this dual harvest of political capital based entirely on an illusion.
And this illusion requires just immense complicity from everyone involved. So to force this abstract debt into the physical reality of the celebrations, Dempsey has another modest proposal for America 250.
Oh, the debt clock one.
Yes. He proposes projecting the national debt clock with its rapidly spinning red numbers directly onto the side of the Washington Monument, just so citizens can contemplate the, quote, true height of our achievement.
Yeah, man, that would definitely ruin the fireworks display.
It really would. But what really drives Dempsey crazy here is the partisan nature of this fiscal theater. He zeroes in on the so-called fiscal conservatives.
Right, the party historically reputed to favor limited government and balanced budgets.
Exactly. He points out that they really only object to massive, bloated spending when it's proposed by the opposing party.
The tribalism completely supersedes the principle, always. Dempsey illustrates this by describing a hypothetical, yet, let's be honest, entirely realistic omnibus spending bill passed by a Republican-led Congress. He calls it a bloated patriotic dirigible.
A dirigible, I love that word.
It's perfect. It's this legislative Frankenstein monster. It contains tax cuts, massive new spending initiatives, billions for border security, billions for defense contractors, random offsets, accounting gimmicks, you name it.
And Dempsey points out that if a Democrat, say, Obama or Biden, had proposed this exact same monstrosity, the political right would have lost their collective minds.
Oh, entirely.
They would have marched in the streets dressed as Paul Revere. They would have invoked the ghost of Milton Friedman, the famous economist who championed free markets and strict constraints on government spending.
They would be screaming from the rooftops that this bill was the literal dawn of socialism.
Exactly. But because the right assembled it themselves, because they slapped an American flag on the cover page and gave it a patriotic-sounding acronym, it is suddenly hailed on their news networks as a transformational legislative win.
Which brings us to the real victims of this debt. And it isn't the current taxpayers, it's the future ones.
The ones who aren't even born yet.
Yes. Deficit spending is essentially taxation without representation applied to generations that do not yet exist.
Yeah.
They are incurring the financial obligation, but they obviously get no vote in the current Congress.
Right. And to memorialize this, Dempsey proposes that any member of Congress who campaigns on fiscal restraint but then votes for these massive omnibus bills should be required to wear 2 lapel pins.
2 pins. Let me guess, the American flag is one.
The standard American flag, yes. And the second is a tiny bronze invoice addressed to the unborn.
A tiny bronze invoice. That is so bleak.
It is bleak. But it transitions us perfectly to the question of how they get away with this. Like, how does a politician convince their constituents that borrowing money from their grandchildren to fund a bloated dirigible of a bill is actually a good thing?
They do it by changing the words.
Yes. Dempsey identifies this mechanism as language laundering.
Language laundering. That's a vital concept.
In Washington, words no longer serve the function of describing reality. Their primary function is to launder reality, to sanitize the unpalatable and just make it sound virtuous.
The psychological mechanics of this are actually profound. Because when you change the language, You fundamentally alter the cognitive framework of the public.
Right. It changes how we process the information.
Exactly. It's a concept heavily explored by George Orwell in his essay, Politics and the English Language. Orwell noted that political language is designed to make lies sound truthful and murder respectable, and to give an appearance of solidity to pure wind.
Pure wind. That is so true.
And Dempsey provides this chilling, modern translation guide for this language laundering. So, for example, when the government spends more than it takes in, it is no longer called a deficit. It's laundered into an investment.
Right. And when a massive financial institution takes reckless gambles and loses, the government using taxpayer money to save them is no longer called a bailout. It becomes an act of ensuring economic resilience.
Economic resilience. It sounds so sturdy.
It really does. And when the state pressures social media companies to remove dissenting voices, it is never, ever called censorship. It's rebranded as misinformation control.
And a massive tax and spend Leviathan bill becomes conservative reform.
It's just wild.
But this semantic shift cognitively disarms the voter. Think about it. If a politician stands at a podium and says, hey, I am authorizing a multi-billion-dollar bailout for a failing bank using your tax dollars, which will increase our deficit, the public would be outraged.
They would riot.
Right, because the language accurately describes a negative action. But if the politician says, we are taking decisive action to ensure economic resilience through strategic public-private investments.
The public is totally mollified.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They might not understand exactly what it means, but resilience and investment sound like positive, responsible concepts. The language creates this impenetrable fog that prevents any real accountability.
I mean, if you've ever tried to read a modern congressional bill or even just watched a snippet of a congressional committee hearing, you realize very quickly that they're not speaking to you.
Not at all.
The language isn't designed to elucidate anything. It's designed to obscure. It makes it virtually impossible for an average citizen to fight back. Like, you can organize a protest against a bailout.
Sure, people did that in 2008.
Exactly. But you cannot realistically organize a protest against resilience. The euphemism treadmill just ensures that by the time the public figures out what a word actually means, the politicians have already moved on to a new, friendlier term.
Yep. They stay one step ahead of the dictionary. And while budgets and language games expose the appetites and the deceptions of a government, Dempsey argues there is a much deeper, much more severe test of a nation's constitutional fidelity.
Oh, yeah. This is where the essay takes a very serious turn.
It does. Because if you truly want to know where the actual sovereignty lies in a political order, you don't look at the budget. You look at how the nation goes to war.
This is where Dempsey shifts from a critique of domestic policy into a devastating indictment of our foreign policy apparatus. He says, quote, war exposes the location of actual sovereignty.
And he takes us straight back to the founders' intent here.
Right, because the men who wrote the Constitution, they weren't these naive idealists, right?
Not at all. They were deep students of history. They understood human ambition. They understood the vanity of leaders. And they intimately understood the intoxicating glamour of being a wartime commander.
James Madison in particular, right, the father of the Constitution.
Yes. Madison was acutely aware of this danger. In his writings, especially his letters and his contributions to the Federalist Papers, he warned repeatedly that the executive branch, the presidency, is the branch most interested in war and the most prone to it.
Which makes sense. War naturally centralizes power.
Exactly. It elevates the executive to the status of a hero or a protector, a savior. In a time of war, the public rallies around the president, and the other branches of government tend to defer to his judgment out of, patriotic duty.
So knowing this immense psychological and structural temptation, the founders made a very deliberate mechanical decision in the drafting of the Constitution.
They took the ultimate power of the state, the power to declare war, to commit the blood and treasure of the nation to a foreign conflict, and they placed it in Article 1 of the Constitution.
Right, not Article 2.
Correct. Article 1 is the legislative branch, Congress. They gave the power of war to Congress, explicitly denying it to the president.
And Dempsey hammers this point home with incredible repetition in the essay. I'm just going to read this part because the rhythm of it is so good.
Go for it.
He writes, "Not the president shall have power to discover war on television and announce it on social media. Not the president shall have power to bomb first and brief later. Not the president shall have power to commence hostilities provided cable news approves and leadership can find a pollster to call it strength. Not the president shall have power to wage war so long as Congress lacks the moral courage to stop him. Congress."
The exclamation points are practically jumping off the page there.
They really are. He's practically screaming it.
And to understand the brilliance of this design, we have to look at the mechanics of Congress itself. Because the founders didn't give war powers to Congress because they thought congressmen were inherently more noble or more peaceful than presidents.
Really? Why did they do it then?
They gave it to Congress because Congress is fundamentally designed to be slow, divided, argumentative, and incredibly inefficient.
Ah, so it was a feature, not a bug.
Precisely. The founders wanted war to be difficult to begin. They wanted this massive hurdle of public deliberation. They wanted factions to argue, representatives to fear for their re-election, and states to debate the costs before a single shot was fired.
That makes so much sense. Peace was meant to be the easy default state. War was meant to be an agonizingly difficult consensus to reach.
Right. But Dempsey points out that modern America has improved upon this constitutional arrangement.
Yeah, quote-unquote, improved.
Right. We've created this slick, frictionless system where the president gets the historical glory of military action, the media gets the dramatic night vision footage, the defense contractors get the massive appropriation.
And what does Congress get?
Congress gets to retain the purely ceremonial duty of either praising the troops or complaining on cable news, without ever actually having to take a hard, politically risky vote on a declaration of war.
It's such a cop-out. And to highlight the absurdity of this imperial presidency, another of Dempsey's America 250 proposals is to present every living president with a small ceremonial crown.
A tiny crown.
Yes, and the crown would be inscribed with the title, Commander-in-Chief of whatever we have decided not to declare.
It's funny, but honestly, the reality behind it is chilling.
It is. I actually dug into the mechanics of this for the show. I wanted to see how presidents actually bypass Article I in modern history.
Oh, nice. What did you find?
It usually involves stretching previous authorizations beyond recognition or just exploiting loopholes. So look at the Obama administration in 2011 with the intervention in Libya.
Right.
They bypassed Congress entirely to launch military strikes. And how did they justify it? Using language laundering. They refused to call it a war. They called it kinetic military action.
Kinetic military action.
Right. By avoiding the word war, they argued they didn't trigger the requirements of the 1973 War Powers Resolution, which technically requires a president to withdraw troops after 60 days if Congress hasn't authorized the action.
Which is fascinating because the War Powers Resolution itself is this mechanical failure.
How so?
Well, it was passed over Richard Nixon's veto to restrain the presidency after the disaster of Vietnam. But in practice, it essentially gave the executive branch a 60-day blank check to bomb anywhere in the world, as long as they promise to stop if Congress complains.
And Congress never complains.
Rarely.
Yeah.
Every president since Nixon has claimed the War Powers Resolution is an unconstitutional infringement on their Article II powers as commander-in-chief, yet they all loosely abide by the 60-day clock just to avoid a constitutional crisis.
And the executive overreach just continued to escalate. You had the Trump administration in 2017 and 2018 launching cruise missile strikes against the Syrian government.
Right.
Again, no congressional approval. They justified it under incredibly broad interpretations of the president's Article II power to defend national interests, completely bypassing the Article II requirement to declare war.
It just becomes standard operating procedure.
Exactly. And then you have the Biden administration launching repeated, sustained airstrikes against Houthi targets in Yemen. In every single case, across different parties and different ideologies, you have presidents who previously swore absolute fidelity to the Constitution, completely ignoring the legislative branch to drop bombs on foreign soil.
Yeah. They usually rely on the 2001 Authorization for Use of Military Force, the AUMF that was passed right after 9/11 to hunt down al-Qaeda.
Oh, right. The AUMF.
And they stretch it like a rubber band to cover completely unrelated conflicts decades later.
It's wild, and Dempsey highlights what happens when a politician actually points out this mechanical failure. He brings up Representative Thomas Massie, a libertarian-leaning Republican, and his consistent opposition to undeclared conflicts, particularly regarding tensions with Iran.
Massie is a great example of this.
He is. Massie simply stated the objective constitutional fact. The executive branch cannot unilaterally commit acts of war against a sovereign nation that hasn't attacked the United States.
Which is literally just reading the document.
Exactly. He wasn't making a wild, radical, pacifist claim. He was quite literally quoting the textbook definition of the Constitution.
But the reaction to Massie is what proves Dempsey's entire thesis about the operating system.
Oh, the reaction was insane.
Massie wasn't engaged in a high-minded debate over constitutional interpretation with his colleagues. He was mocked as a crank,
He was labeled an isolationist.
accused of being unpatriotic, charged with undermining American strength on the global stage.
And Dempsey has this incredible analogy for this treatment. He says that attacking Thomas Massie for pointing out the Constitution is like accusing a smoke alarm of arson.
I mean, that just hits the nail on the head.
It's so good.
It's a brilliant distillation of the psychological projection of the political establishment. Massie held up the clear mirror of the Constitution. The establishment looked in the mirror, hated the reflection of its own hypocrisy and its constitutional evasion, and so it attacked the mirror.
It attacked the smoke alarm.
Exactly. When a politician in today's system actually takes the written rules seriously, they aren't viewed as a patriot. They are viewed as a dangerous obstacle that needs to be removed. The system punishes the exact behavior the founders tried to mandate.
Which is just so profoundly backwards. And to honor those rare politicians who actually read the rules, Dempsey has another modest proposal.
Let's hear it.
He suggests erecting a bronze statue in Washington of the unknown constitutional conservative.
Okay, I like it.
The statue would depict a lone figure holding a pocket constitution in one hand and a primary challenge notice in the other.
Because they're definitely getting primary.
Because that is the ultimate fate of anyone who takes the rule seriously. Their own party will fund a primary challenger to get rid of them for being uncooperative with the hypocrisy.
Which sets up, honestly, the most compelling thought experiment in the entire essay. Dempsey asks us to imagine if the architect of this broken system actually showed up today to inspect his work.
Oh, the Madison time travel scenario.
Yes. Imagine James Madison time-traveling from the late 18th century and arriving in Washington, D.C. in 2026 for the America 250 celebrations. He expects to see the republic he painstakingly designed.
Right.
Instead, he finds an imperial court managed by an unelected bureaucracy.
It's such a vivid image. Madison asks if Congress still jealously guards its war powers, and he is politely informed that Congress prefers not to be bothered with such difficult matters until the bombs are already falling and the cable news chyrons are running.
Yeah, we'll handle it on Twitter, basically.
Exactly. Then he asks if the national debt is constrained by Republican virtue and fiscal prudence, and they hand him a commemorative challenge coin while pointing to a $39 trillion debt clock spinning out of control.
And it gets worse. Madison asks if laws are still made by the elected legislators in the Capitol building.
Right.
And he is introduced to the sprawling labyrinth of the administrative state. He learns about administrative rulemaking, where executive agencies write rules that have the force of law without ever passing Congress.
Just a total bypass of the legislative process.
Totally. He learns about judicial policymaking, executive orders, emergency declarations that last for decades, and omnibus bills crafted in secret by marketing consultants and lobbyists.
And he asks if the people are still free?
Right. And he is told with a straight face, yes, absolutely. Subject to the terms of service, intelligence classification, and the unquestionable good judgment of interagency experts.
The terms of service. Oh, man. And to commemorate Madison's horror, Dempsey's final modest proposal is for congressional leadership to gather on the Capitol steps, read Article 1, Section 8 out loud.
Remind us what that is.
That is the very specific, limited list of powers granted to Congress, like coining money and establishing post offices. So they read that out loud and then have leadership patiently explain to the crowd why that section no longer applies unless it can be weaponized in a lawsuit against the opposing party.
That is painfully accurate.
Dempsey jokes that Madison would either faint on the spot or ask for immediate directions back to his plantation in Virginia. Because the founders wouldn't just be rolling in their graves, they'd be filing massive amicus briefs from them.
They absolutely would. But, you know, we really have to address the strongest counter-argument to Dempsey's critique here.
Okay, let's hear it.
The standard defense of the administrative state and the imperial presidency is one of necessity. A critic of Dempsey would say, look, Madison lived in a world of muskets and sailing ships.
Right.
We live in a world of cyber warfare, global pandemics, artificial intelligence, and high-frequency trading. So doesn't a 21st century global superpower inherently need a massive managerial state and a fast-acting executive branch that an 18th century farmer like Madison couldn't have possibly imagined?
Exactly. Isn't the Constitution just too slow for the modern world? I mean, a lot of people make that argument.
They do. And Dempsey anticipates this defense, and his answer is pretty profound. He acknowledges that the Constitution is not a suicide pact. It must function in reality. But he argues fiercely that it is also not a suggestion box.
It's a suggestion box.
It is a strict structure of restraint designed to curb the darkest impulses of human power. And then Dempsey does something really vital here. He strips away the mythology of the founders.
Oh, this part was so interesting.
Yeah. He doesn't deify Madison or Washington. He explicitly states they were not angels. They had deep, horrific moral blindness. They wrote eloquently and passionately about the unalienable rights of liberty while actively tolerating and participating in human bondage.
Right. They were hypocrites in their own right. They owned slaves while writing that all men are created equal.
Precisely. But you tease, and this is the crucial distinction Dempsey makes regarding the nature of their hypocrisy versus ours. The founders were serious men.
Serious men.
Yes. They sinned against principles. They actually had the immense courage to articulate and institutionalize. By writing those principles down, they planted the moral explosives in the Constitution that later generations, like Abraham Lincoln and Martin Luther King Jr., would detonate to correct those very injustices.
Wow.
Modern politicians, Dempsey argues, aren't wrestling with profound moral contradictions or the tragic burden of liberty. They are simply sinning against principles they have reduced to cheap merchandise. They aren't struggling with the weight of the republic. They were just ignoring the rules when following them would cost them a poll point.
That is a massive distinction, and that inability to handle the complexity, the contradictions, and the gravity of American history is what is spiritually tearing the country apart as we approach 2026.
It really is.
Dempsey breaks down the partisan divide over how we view our own history, and he shows how both major factions are fundamentally failing to engage with reality. He says the right wants reverence without repentance.
Reverence without repentance.
Right. They want the 4th of July without Juneteenth. They want to airbrush the blood out of the marble. They want to pretend the history of the nation is a flawless, sacred pageant of uninterrupted virtue.
And conversely, the left wants critique without gratitude.
Exactly.
They want Juneteenth severed entirely from the 4th of July. They want to condemn America by pretending the marble itself has no beauty at all, treating the entirety of American history as nothing more than a prolonged criminal indictment of exploitation and oppression.
Dempsey brings up the cultural fights over national park exhibits and historical monuments regarding figures like George Washington. Washington owned enslaved people. That is a brutal, undeniable fact.
It is.
But he was also an essential founder, a man of immense character who voluntarily relinquished power, without whom the republic would not exist. That is also an undeniable fact. Dempsey argues that America is both a miracle and a crime. Both things are true at the exact same time.
And this goes to the heart of the psychological health of the nation. Dempsey writes, "A serious people can bear this contradiction. An unserious people either edits the exhibit or burns down the museum."
That line is so powerful. Edits the exhibit or burns down the museum.
It really captures it. The right wants to edit the exhibit to hide the reality of slavery and the broken treaties. The left wants to burn down the museum because of those sins, ignoring the unparalleled engine of prosperity and freedom the museum represents. Both approaches are evasions of reality. Both are, frankly, spiritually childish.
I mean, if you're listening to this, think about your own media diet for a second. Think about the algorithms feeding you content on your phone.
It's all curated.
It is. How often are you being served a curated version of history that is purely an airbrushed patriotic montage or purely a cynical criminal indictment?
Probably every day.
Exactly. When we consume history that lacks that agonizing tension between the miracle and the crime, we lose the ability to engage with reality. We become unserious people demanding simple narratives in a complex world.
Which brings us to the core philosophical focus of this deep dive, and really the climax of Dempsey's essay. If we're currently trapped in this unserious, hypocritical, partisan operating system, how do we escape it?
Right. How do we get out?
Dempsey diagnoses our current condition by breaking down the philosophical eras of how we view the nation. First, there was the modern myth.
Okay.
The modern myth was the earnest, somewhat naive belief of the mid-20th century. It was the belief that America is purely good, that progress is a straight line upwards, that our institutions are inherently noble, and our leaders are selfless guardians of liberty. It was sincere, but it lacked a truthful reckoning with the shadows of our history.
Then came the postmodern critique, which is the era we have been living in for the last few decades, and the one that has largely broken our political discourse.
Oh, absolutely.
The postmodern critique exposed the myth. It looked at the history, the hidden crimes, the structural inequalities, and it said, no, America is just about power. Progress is just propaganda written by the winners. Institutions are just masks for domination and greed.
It deconstructs everything.
Postmodernism exposes the hypocrisy, much like Dempsey did for the first half of his essay, actually. But it leaves you with absolutely nothing to build upon. It leaves you with pure, paralyzing cynicism.
And that brings us to the metamodern task. This is the synthesis. If modernism is sincere but naive, and postmodernism is hyper-aware but cynical, metamodernism is the agonizing attempt to synthesize the two.
And how does Dempsey define that?
He defines it beautifully. He says the metamodern task is to choose to believe again after the exposure without ever becoming naive again.
Wow.
It is the choice to love America after learning the ugly truth about the hypocrisy, the unpayable debt, the undeclared wars, and the broken promises.
It's the choice to be sincere through the cynicism. Dempsey says that a broken country can only truly celebrate its 250th birthday if that celebration becomes a profound confession.
A confession. That's a strong word.
Yeah, but he isn't talking about self-hatred. He isn't talking about the progressive theater where elite politicians accuse dead people of sins while copying their worst habits.
Right.
He is talking about a real, honest national admission. We have to look in the mirror and say, we inherited a republic and we built a bureaucratic machine. We inherited federalism and we built massive centralization. We inherited self-government and we built a government run by permanent emergency and executive fiat.
And that confession is the absolute prerequisite for what Dempsey calls truthful love.
Truthful love.
Patriotic love is not idolatry. It is not a blind, infantile belief in national innocence. Real love, whether for a country, a spouse, or a friend, is the willingness to tell the absolute, unjarnished truth about the thing you refuse to abandon.
Refuse to abandon. That's key.
It means holding the unbearable tension that America is guilty, noble, ridiculous, beautiful, corrupt, brave, hypocritical, exhausted, and yet completely worth saving.
Truthful love. It means saying America's broken without concluding that America is dead.
Beautifully said.
That is a massive, sweeping, philosophical view of the nation. But we have to translate that down to reality, because all of this, the $39 trillion debt, the AUMF authorizations, the language laundering by Washington elites, it all feels incredibly far removed from the average citizen.
It does. It feels abstract.
It feels like a movie playing on a screen that we can't touch. We watch the hypocrisy, we get angry, and then we go back to our lives feeling powerless.
Well, politics on a national scale is designed to make you feel powerless. The administrative state thrives on the apathy of the individual.
So we have to personalize this. I want to look at Dempsey's final challenge in the essay and explore exactly what it means for you, the listener, right now in your daily life.
Let's do it.
He writes, do we still want a republic? If the answer is yes, then America 250 cannot be merely a celebration. It must be a rebuke.
A rebuke.
A rebuke to the hypocrites, a rebuke to the evasion of responsibility. But how do you, as an individual, actually deliver that rebuke? How do you push back against a massive political divide that is fueled by an operating system of euphemism and lies?
The answer is that the metamodern synthesis has to start at the microscopic level. It has to start within the individual.
Okay, yeah.
If the country is fundamentally broken by hypocrisy, by leaders who say one thing and do the exact opposite, who are corrupt in the language of virtue, then the ultimate rebellion against that system is to ensure that your actions perfectly reflect what you say you believe.
Right. You cannot easily change the bureaucracy in Washington.
Yeah.
You can't snap your fingers and balance the federal budget, and you can't recall the troops from undeclared conflicts. But you can change your immediate reality. You can choose to live a metamodern life.
Exactly.
What does that actually look like? It means actively stripping the language laundering out of your own daily life. It means refusing to use euphemisms when you talk to your spouse, your kids, or your coworkers. It means telling the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, and refusing to participate in the little cynical games and white lies that surround us every day.
It means being deeply real, true, and fruitful to your neighbors and your local community. If Washington is characterized by reverence without repentance on the right, or critique without gratitude on the left, you must actively practice both repentance and gratitude in your own life.
Yeah.
When you make a mistake, you don't launder the language. You confess it honestly and make amends. When you recognize beauty, or when you receive help from a neighbor, you offer sincere vocal gratitude. You actively refuse the spiritual childishness of the political extremes by acting like a serious adult in your own community.
Man, that is such a vital call to action.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with some provocative questions to mull over as you go about your day.
Take these with you, seriously.
Where in your own life are you demanding reverence from others without offering repentance for your own faults? Where are you offering harsh, cynical critique of your circumstances without a single shred of gratitude for the good things you actually possess? And most importantly, how can living with sincere, profound honesty in your local, immediate community cut through the cynical noise of this postmodern world and bring you closer to something genuinely sacred?
Because if we can achieve that synthesis on an individual level, if we can look at the overwhelming brokenness of the world, acknowledge the staggering hypocrisy of our institutions, and still choose to build something beautiful, truthful, and lasting in our own backyards, then the republic isn't dead yet. The operating system can be rewritten, but it has to be rewritten from the bottom up.
It all comes back to that venerable old man having a birthday party. We can't ignore the fact that the house is on fire, the inheritance is gone, and the leaders are cheating at cards.
We really can't.
But we also don't have to walk away from the table in despair. We can sit down, tell the truth about the mess without flinching, and start the incredibly hard, sacred work of cleaning it up, one truthful interaction at a time.
I couldn't agree more.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Be the change you want to see, seek the sacred and the sincere, hold on to that truthful love, and we will see you next time.
Well, that was today's episode, Metamodernism Uncensored. Thank you for joining, and we'll see you again